Ladies and gentlemen, history has just been made, and the world's loudest voices suddenly went silent. No front page headlines, no breaking news, no applause from the West. Why? Because India didn't just reach for the stars, it snatched the spotlight. The space game has changed forever, and while BBC and the USA may be quiet, the sky just echoed with the roar of a billion dreams. This wasn't just a launch, this was a revolution. There was a time they told India to stay in its lane. That greatness was not something it could reach for. That space, science, and exploration were playgrounds reserved for richer nations, for colonizers, for empires built on centuries of dominance. India was expected to watch from the sidelines, quiet, modest, grateful for whatever scraps of recognition were thrown its way. They said India didn't have the budget. They said it didn't have the brains. They said it didn't have the right to be in the elite circle of space powers. But today, the same voices that once laughed are silent. Today, India didn't just launch a rocket, it launched a message. A message that echoed beyond Earth's atmosphere. A message that said, we are no longer waiting for your approval. We are building our legacy, with or without your spotlight. This wasn't just another space mission. This was a cosmic clapback. A roar from a country that has risen from ashes time and time again. A country that was looted, broken, and underestimated for centuries. A country that once had to beg for food aid is now sending astronauts into orbit with its own technology, on its own terms. What the world witnessed wasn't just a scientific milestone, it was a spiritual one. It was a symbolic shift, a reclamation of dignity. Because when that rocket thundered into the sky, it carried more than just astronauts and equipment. It carried centuries of silence. It carried the dreams of a billion people who had been told, over and over again, that they weren't good enough. It carried the tears of freedom fighters who died believing in an India that would someday rise to lead, not follow. India's space journey didn't begin in billion-dollar labs or state-of-the-art universities. It began with makeshift launch pads. It began with scientists carrying satellite parts on bicycles. It began with rejection, ridicule, and resource constraints that would have stopped any other nation in its tracks. But India kept moving, quietly, relentlessly, with humility, yes, but also with an iron will. And now, those same scientists are no longer riding bicycles. They're driving the future. Let the record show this wasn't handed to India. It was earned. Every breakthrough, every test, every success and failure along the way was built on determination, not dollars. Grit, not gifts. Belief, not validation. And that's why the silence today, from media outlets who normally shout about every minor space update from the West, is so loud. Because this mission didn't just break the Earth's gravity, it shattered the myth of Western superiority in space. It exposed a truth the global powers don't want to admit. India isn't catching up anymore. India is setting the pace. The BBC doesn't want to say it. The major US networks won't flash it across their screens. Because to acknowledge this moment is to admit that the narrative has changed. That the old world order is crumbling. That a nation they once ruled now stands as a leader in the very field they used to dominate. But that silence doesn't diminish the achievement, it amplifies it. Because the ones who stay quiet are often the ones who feel the most threatened. You see, India didn't just build a rocket, it built belief. Not just for itself, but for every nation, every person who has ever been told, you can't. It's a reminder that power isn't about who speaks the loudest, but who dares to rise when the world refuses to look. And India has risen. It has risen with every ounce of courage, wisdom, and resilience woven into its DNA. It has risen from the dust of colonization, from the heartbreak of partition, from the burden of poverty, from the mocking of critics. And now, it has risen into the sky, undeniably, unapologetically, unforgettably. This mission is more than a technological feat. It's a thunderous answer to centuries of doubt. It's a giant leap not just for a nation, but for an idea. The idea that no one can define your worth but you. And while the world may stay silent today, tomorrow, they will study this mission. They will follow its path. They will tell their children how India changed the game. But for now, let them be silent. Because the sky just got a new name written in fire. And that name is India. This launch wasn't just about machines, or calculations, or countdowns. It was about centuries of pain, pride and perseverance blasting off into the sky. When India sent its astronauts into space, it wasn't merely a scientific victory, it was an emotional eruption. It was the kind of moment that makes generations stop in their tracks and realize, we did it. We belong here, and we always have. Because this wasn't just a rocket, it was a time capsule. Inside it was the memory of a colonized nation that was once stripped of its dignity, its wealth, its voice. Inside it were the echoes of a people who were told that they were less intelligent, less capable, less worthy. It carried the soul of a civilization that has given the world mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and philosophy, yet had to endure centuries of being told it was somehow behind. That same soul just soared into space, unapologetically reclaiming its place in the future. This moment is not a fluke, it is the result of relentless struggle, the product of decades of sacrifice by men and women who worked in silence, with little recognition, often without the tools or funding their counterparts in the West took for granted. It's the story of Indian scientists working late into the night, drinking cutting chai, in dimly lit labs, stretching every rupee to push boundaries. It's the story of families who sacrificed stability so their children could dream bigger than their circumstances. And now, those dreams are orbiting the Earth. Every step of this mission was soaked in something deeper than ambition. It was soaked in emotion, in legacy, in a kind of pain that becomes fuel, in a kind of pride that refuses to be dimmed. This is what happens when a people rise not in anger, but in purpose. They don't retaliate with bitterness, they respond with brilliance. And when that brilliance lights up the sky, even the world's silence becomes a standing ovation. Because what was really launched that day wasn't just a space capsule, it was a message to the world, to history, to every kid who has ever looked up at the stars and felt like they were too far away. That message says, you're not too small, you're not too late, and you're not too broken. The rocket that left India's soil carried with it not just hope but healing. It carried the voices of grandparents who never imagined this moment, but planted the seeds for it anyway. It carried the faith of children in slums, who see science not as luxury, but as escape. It carried the silent strength of mothers and fathers, who may not understand rocket science, but understand what it means to dream without limits. This is why India's space mission isn't just a national win, it's a human one. It's what happens when belief is stronger than circumstance. When roots are deep and unshakable, even as branches reach for the sky. And let's be clear, this pride does not come from ego. It comes from endurance. It comes from being knocked down, and choosing to rise anyway. From being overlooked, and choosing to overachieve anyway. From being told you'll never make it, and launching anyway. The rocket wasn't powered by fuel alone. It was powered by every insult ever endured, every door ever closed, every headline that ignored India's brilliance. Every time the world praised others, and forgot the ones quietly building something bigger. Every time success came, but validation never followed. This was for all of that. And in spite of all of that, it was for the teachers in rural schools, drawing solar systems on chalkboards. It was for the kids building cardboard models of ISRO rockets, and dreaming beyond their means. It was for the scientists who kept showing up, even when the world wasn't watching. This was for India. But it was also for everyone who's ever had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. This mission reminds us that true greatness doesn't need to shout, it just needs to launch. And that's exactly what India did. Quietly, powerfully, emotionally. No red carpet, no bragging, just results. And while many around the world may choose not to speak about it, their silence doesn't shrink the moment, it magnifies it. Because when something is this powerful, this historic, this undeniably emotional, even silence becomes a confession. They don't need to say anything. India already said everything, with fire, with focus, and with flight. And the world will remember, not just what went up, but everything it carried with it. While the West measured space with money, India measured it with heart. For decades, space was considered the playground of the powerful, a battlefield of billionaires, a race where the finish line was reserved for the rich, and the rules were written by the few. They had rockets made of gold, headlines crafted by legacy, and the world's cameras always pointed in their direction. And in the background, quietly, purposefully, patiently, India was building something that couldn't be bought. Belief. They said India couldn't compete, that without the budgets of NASA or the glamour of SpaceX, it would never be a real player. They laughed at the modest equipment, the humble beginnings, the frugal missions. They called it cheap, they mocked it. But now, they're not laughing, because India didn't try to be the West, it tried to be better, and it was. While others were flexing muscle, India was mastering mindset. While they raced to dominate, India raced to understand. While they invested billions for prestige, India invested vision for progress. This wasn't just about going higher. It was about going wiser, about doing more with less, about showing the world that excellence doesn't require extravagance. It requires effort, relentless, unapologetic, unglamorous effort. They said India was late to the game, but India wasn't late. It was just on its own time, because true greatness doesn't chase the clock, it builds its own era. And that's exactly what happened. India didn't copy the rulebook, it rewrote it, and in doing so, it didn't just participate in the space race, it redefined it. Every bolt tightened in this mission was a rebellion. Every code written, every satellite tested, every trajectory calculated. It all shouted one message: we don't need your spotlight to shine. Because what India built isn't just technology, it built trust. Trust in its own people, trust in its own capacity, trust in the idea that intelligence isn't owned by any one country, and ambition doesn't speak with an accent, that the future doesn't belong to the loudest voice, but to the most determined soul. The West had its turn to lead, its chance to show what it could do with endless money, with infinite access, with global attention, and yes, it achieved incredible things. But now, something new is happening. The narrative is shifting, the baton is moving, not because it was handed over, but because it was taken, and not out of anger, out of necessity. Because if the world is going to evolve, if humanity is going to truly reach for the stars, it can't just be the privileged who do it. It has to be all of us. It has to be the nations who were once told no, now building a resounding yes. It has to be the dreamers, with dust on their shoes, and fire in their hearts. That's what India represents, not a challenge to the West, but a correction, a balancing of a world that has been tilted for too long, a reminder that brilliance doesn't live in bank accounts, it lives in dreams, in discipline, and in the daring to try. So while others boast of their billions, India counts its breakthroughs. While others rely on legacy, India builds from the ground up. And maybe that's why this moment stings for those who've always led, because now they have to share the sky, and that's a hard thing to do, when you've never had to look up at anyone before. But this mission proves that the sky doesn't belong to one nation. It doesn't care about politics, or borders, or GDP. It only answers to those bold enough to reach it. India reached it, and it did so without needing to imitate, without needing to beg, and without needing to be validated. It stood on its own vision, and that vision just soared. This wasn't a victory lap. This was a wake-up call to every person, every country, every doubter, whoever believed progress had a gate around it, that you needed to be invited to innovate, that only the few could touch the stars. India just proved otherwise. And the best part, it's only getting started, because once a nation realizes it can lead, truly lead, you can't silence it, you can't slow it down, you can't keep it small. So go ahead, let them call it luck, let them stay silent, let them avoid the headline. But the rocket launched, the data was transmitted, the world turned, and history was written, not in dollars, but in defiance. And the new chapter, it starts with India. The silence from the global media isn't just oversight, it's fear wearing a mask, because deep down, they know something monumental has shifted. A new power has risen, not through conquest, but through quiet, relentless brilliance. India's astronaut mission wasn't just a technological triumph, it was a statement. It said to the world, we're no longer playing catch-up, we're not the underdog, we are the future. And when a nation that was once seen as a colony, a follower, a struggling third world country, begins to lead at the front of humanity's most advanced frontier, everything changes. You can feel the discomfort in the silence. The BBC doesn't flash it in bold headlines. Major Western outlets avoid the front page celebration. The applause is missing, but it's not because the achievement wasn't historic. It's because it was. If another nation, one with a shinier flag, or a bigger war chest, had done this, the world would have stopped to cheer. There would have been parades, documentaries, and hashtags. But when India does it with fewer resources,
fewer words, and more impact. Suddenly the room goes quiet. That silence, it's not ignorance, it's acknowledgement they don't want to give. Because acknowledging India's rise means confronting their own fading dominance. It means admitting that power no longer comes only from Wall Street or Washington, from London or Berlin. It now rises from Bengaluru, from ISO Rose Labs, from the determined eyes of scientists who never gave up, even when the world wasn't looking. This mission is about much more than space. It's about place. India has claimed its place, not just on the map, but in history. It's the rise of a nation that doesn't seek validation from old powers. It doesn't need to be crowned a leader. It acts like one. It proves it. It leads with results, not rhetoric, with execution, not entitlement. When India launched this mission, it didn't ask for attention. It didn't boast. It didn't threaten. It simply delivered. And that delivery didn't just reach orbit, it shook the entire geopolitical foundation, because it means that brilliance, strategy, and willpower can now come from places once ignored, once dismissed. It means that the future will no longer be decided in closed rooms, by the same few hands. It will be written by those who dared to believe, even when no one was clapping. India's rise is not accidental. It is the result of patience forged in hardship, of innovation born not in comfort, but in constraints. While others had luxury, India had to make every rupee count. It had to build smarter, cleaner, leaner, and in doing so, it created a model that the world can no longer afford to ignore. Because this isn't just efficient science, it's empowered science. And the ones who once scoffed at it, they're now watching quietly, learning silently, and trying to figure out how India did it, without the fanfare, without the arrogance, and without asking for permission. This silence from the West is also revealing, in another way. It exposes how tightly they cling to the idea that leadership looks like them. But now, the face of progress is changing. It speaks Hindi, Tamil, Bengali. It works out of modest offices, powered by big dreams. It walks barefoot into schools, and comes out coding satellites. The idea that technological greatness must come from the West has been shattered, not with anger, but with achievement. India has earned this moment, and the world may not be celebrating it yet, but they will, because history doesn't forget the ones who dared, the ones who broke orbit and boundaries in the same breath, the ones who rose from being ruled to becoming rulers of their own destiny. And this is only the beginning. The silence, it's temporary. The recognition, it's inevitable, because truth doesn't stay buried forever. And when the dust settles, the launch will still stand, the mission will still orbit, and India's name will be forever etched in the story of human advancement, not as a late arrival, but as a pioneer. So let the silence stretch, let the headlines skip, let the West pretend not to notice. India doesn't need a round of applause to keep moving forward, because the rockets already left the ground, and the sky, once guarded, once off limits, is now open. And above all that silence, a new voice is rising, clear, unwavering, and unstoppable. It says, we are here, we are capable, we are just getting started. And this time, the world will have no choice but to listen. They tried to ignore it, they tried to downplay it, but truth has a way of rising, like smoke from fire, like rockets from Earth. And what the world witnessed with India's astronaut mission was not a lucky strike, not a borrowed victory, but the unfolding of destiny that's been centuries in the making. A destiny built on persistence, not privilege, on sacrifice, not shortcuts, on vision, not validation. India didn't just launch astronauts, it launched a message to every single soul who's ever been told, wait your turn, to every nation that was forced to believe it was meant only to follow, never to lead, to every child staring up at the stars thinking, maybe one day. That day is now, that time is here, and that leader is India. For too long, power in space was gatekept, sealed behind the language of wealth, wrapped in politics, and sold as prestige. For too long, the narrative was singular. Space belongs to the few. And yet, without asking, India made its own path. It didn't beg to be let in. It built its own door, and then it launched through it. The silence from the West isn't just because they missed the story, it's because they're living it. And it's not theirs to tell this time. This story is being written in Devancheka Megari, in Telugu, in Marathi, in the calloused hands of engineers, in the chalk dust of rural classrooms, in the fire of every young Indian who refuses to settle for almost the same world that once colonized India, is now being forced to reckon with a country that is not just independent, but incomparable. This mission was never about competing with anyone else. It was about competing with the limits placed on India by history, by poverty, by by assumption, and every second that rocket soared, it shattered those limits one by one. Every kilometer upward screamed, "We are more than what you labeled us. We are more than what you expected. We are limitless." And in that silence, where the world refused to cheer, India found its voice, not in arrogance, but in authenticity, because India has never needed anyone's permission to shine. It shines from within, from its ancient past, that gave the world the number 0, to its present that's proving there is zero reason to doubt its future. This mission was not a surprise. It was inevitable. Let the cameras turn away. Let the headlines bury the story beneath distractions. Let the institutions that once claimed to champion innovation stay quiet now that innovation wears a different skin. Because history is not written by those who shout the loudest. It is written by those who move the furthest. And India is moving fast forward, fearlessly. It is a movement not just in technology, but in thought, not just in space, but in spirit. It's not just one rocket, it's a revolution, one that says we no longer need to prove ourselves to anyone. The proof is in the skies, the proof is in the silence of those who once doubted, the proof is in the gravity we no longer obey. And to every Indian watching, know this: the mission may be in space, but the victory is yours. It belongs to every teacher who never gave up on a dream, every student who studied under a streetlight, every mother who prayed her child would do something great, every father who worked an extra job so his daughter could go to college, every citizen who believed, even when the world didn't. This is not just a national achievement, it's a global reset, a reminder that greatness comes not from wealth or weapons, but from will, and India's will. It's unshakable, so let them be silent, let them scroll past. But know this: the universe just got a new explorer, and it didn't come from old empires or billion-dollar empires. It came from the land of Gandhi, of Kalam, of resilience. India is not asking for the world's applause, it's commanding the world's attention, and the sky is no longer the limit, it's just the beginning.